We often talk about creativity and empathy like they're two sides of the same coin. The idea that to make something really meaningful, you've got to connect with people on this deep emotional level. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if that common assumption is just a little bit off? So, here's the big question. Is empathy the secret ingredient for a creative life? It kind of feels like it should be, right? But some really interesting new research suggests the answer is a lot more specific and, frankly, a lot more surprising. Because, yeah, the science says it's just not that simple. It turns out the real link between these two huge parts of being human is way more nuanced than we thought. And it really forces us to take a closer look at what we even mean when we say the word empathy. All right, so let's dive in and untangle this. First things first, we need to be really clear about the type of creativity we're even talking about in this study. See, this isn't about what some people call big C creativity, the Einsteins and Picassos of the world. Nope. This is about everyday creativity. It's the originality we bring to our normal lives, how you get creative in the kitchen, in your writing, in the garden. It's the kind of creativity that every single one of us has access to. And here's where things take a really fascinating turn. The researchers behind all this started with a simple idea. What if our one-size-fits-all definition of empathy is actually holding us back? What if empathy isn't just one thing? And that single question brings us to the absolute heart of this whole explainer, the scientific difference between two very distinct kinds of empathy. Okay, so on one side, you have cognitive empathy. Think of this as the thinking part of empathy. It's your ability to understand someone's perspective, to see the world through their eyes, without necessarily feeling what they feel. And on the other side, there's emotional empathy. This is the feeling part. This is when you actually share and absorb their emotions. You feel their joy, you feel their sadness. So one is about understanding, and the other is about feeling with them, a huge difference. So now that we have that crucial distinction, what happens when you actually test which one is connected to creativity? Let's take a look at the evidence. So the researchers set up two pretty thorough studies with over 800 people from all different walks of life, students, working adults, you name it, to see exactly how these two types of empathy lined up with their everyday creative habits. And boom, here's the headline finding. Across the board, cognitive empathy, that ability to take on other perspectives, was positively linked to higher creativity. But emotional empathy, the data showed no real link at all. And in some areas, like science, it was actually a negative predictor. Pretty wild, right? And this wasn't a fluke. This pattern was incredibly solid. It didn't matter who the participants were or how creativity was measured. The results kept pointing to the same thing. The thinking part of empathy seems to help creativity, while the feeling part doesn't. So this obviously leads us to that classic chicken and egg question. Okay, we know cognitive empathy and creativity are linked, but does one actually cause the other? In other words, does getting better at understanding people make you more creative? Or does being a creative person just make you more understanding? Which way does the arrow point? To figure this out, the researchers got clever. They tracked people over several months. They'd measure their empathy and creativity at the start, and then check back in later to measure them again. This way, they could see which trait predicted a change in the other one. And the results were crystal clear. The people who had higher cognitive empathy at the beginning of the study, they showed a real, measurable increase in their creative behaviors later on. So it really seems like perspective taking is a genuine driver of future creativity. But what about the other way around? Well, the data showed it just wasn't true. Being more creative didn't lead to any increase in cognitive empathy later on. So there it is. It's a one-way street. Perspective taking fuels creativity, not the other way around. So what in the world does all this mean for us, for our actual lives? How can we take this fascinating insight and use it to become a bit more innovative and creative ourselves? Well, the biggest takeaway is this. If you want to boost creativity, whether it's in yourself, your team, or your kids, the secret isn't just to be more empathetic in a vague sense. The secret is to actively practice cognitive empathy. And the best part is that it's a trainable skill. For work, that means really digging in to understand your customers' needs. In schools, it could mean using tools like empathy maps to literally see the world from someone else's point of view. It's all about understanding because that's what sparks the best idea. And really, this all brings us to a pretty profound final thought from Albert Einstein himself, which was actually quoted in the paper. This research is a great reminder that powerful creativity doesn't always come from a random flash of brilliance. A lot of the time, it comes from the deep, disciplined work of trying to see the world from someone else's point of view. It suggests that the first step to solving a problem isn't just having a great idea, it's understanding the person who's having the problem in the first place.